All right. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Sunday night Bible study, or Bible study whenever you're watching. It don't have to be Sunday night. We want to welcome you. We are continuing with No More Excuses, Dr. Tony Evans, and we are looking at the life of David. And tonight specifically, we're going to talk about sexual sin. If you remember, we talked about David. David was, for about the first 50 years of David's life, David was on the money. The Bible called David a man after God's own heart. And then somewhere along the way, David got off track. And after he became king, he became lazy. And the next thing you know, he was at the wrong place at the wrong time. And he gives into temptation. And the next thing you know, his world is falling apart. And thus is the case with any type of sexual sin. What we think we're doing in secret, or we think we're doing it in private, behind a closed door, in the secret of night, or in the dark of night. It's interesting that the places, many places that promote sexual activity, or say strip clubs, are open at night, and there's something about this darkness and the secrecy of the night. And King David, where did David go wrong? Where did David quit being the man after God's own heart, and on this path that he loses everything? He loses his kingdom. His son is against him, and it's his life is turned upside down. Well, it happened about the time he was king, and the Bible tells us what went wrong with David. It was springtime, and springtime was the time when kings went off to war. He didn't fight in the winter because it was too hard, but when the spring came around and it was time for warmth and the snow to melt and things of that nature, kings led their armies off into battle. But David, this particular time, when it was time to go, he stayed at home. David should have been the leader of his men, and the leader was on the sidelines, and the leader was sending out everybody else to do all the work and fight the battles, and the leader, David, chose to be at home. He chose to do something that wasn't what he was required to do, and he should have been out fighting with his man. David wasn't where he should have been, and he wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. So think about it here. We have a middle-aged man hanging around the house with nothing to do. Now, remember, men, middle age is where most men go through their midlife crisis. And, here I am, smack dab in the middle of it, middle age. Maybe statistically wise, I'm over halfway there. But if we're not careful, us middle-aged men can make some bad decisions. It's middle age where, just about the time that the kids are grown, and it should be time for you and your wife to look off to the future about how you spent all this time and effort raising kids and putting all the money into that, paying their ways through college, and now it should be you and your wife's time to look for the future and think about what you're going to do in the next years, vacation-wise and all that, and then how you're going to live in retirement and things of that nature. This should be the time for middle-aged men to start putting together the finishing touches on their 401ks and getting everything ready for retirement, so that when we retire, we don't have to go to the food line. That we can have some sort of decent retirement. It's middle-aged men that should be leading the way for younger men to say, hey, come on, there's kingdom work to be done, and together we can do this. And middle-aged men training younger men instead of waiting until we have old men training middle-aged men. It ought to be the other way around. And our churches are backwards on this. We have old guys who don't get out of the way, and then by the time they finally get out of the way, the guys that were once younger, now they're starting to head towards middle age, or, beyond middle age. They're starting to head towards old age, and their best years of being used is behind them. What we need more is middle-aged men training younger men, 20s and 25-year-olds to, hey, here's work that we're going to do for the kingdom. Here's what we're going to do for the church. And so David, a middle-aged man, doesn't go where he's supposed to go, and he's sitting around the house with nothing to do. It's springtime for war, but it's also springtime's known for love. And he's a king, and so he can have anything he wants. And that's a bad combination, being middle-aged, nothing to do, and being able to have anything you wanted. That's rough. And so here is David, and he's getting ready to make a big mistake. Men, I just want to encourage you, stay the course. I got to visit today with Charlie Garrison. He's in the hospital, and he's don't have that many days left here on planet Earth. And I visit with him at the hospital, and I just saw the integrity in a 92-year-old man who still loves his wife as though that she was the young 20-year-old that he was married to 72 years ago. He still loves his family, and he's revered by his wife and his daughters and his children. And that's the way we want to finish like that. We want to end well, where we look back and people can say, you know what, that's a man of integrity. That's a man that when it got tough, when it got hard, he didn't waver. When a younger girl come around and his wife had put on some pounds because she delivered him 2 or 3 or 4 babies, and when a woman come around and seduced him because she was a little younger and had a little bit more time than the wife had because she's helping raise the kids, and you make these mistakes, and it happens before you know it. The people that I've talked to that was gone through these type of things happen quicker than you realize. And so David, here he is, he got up from his late afternoon nap, and he decided to walk around on the roof of the palace, which was situated high above the city. And 2 Samuel 11:12 said David scanned the city, and here's what it says. He saw a woman bathing, a very beautiful woman. Now, what's that mean? He saw a woman with no clothes on. And so David, being a middle-aged man with nothing to do, he should have been out doing what he was supposed to do. He made the mistake. He saw, and if you remember, I told you that maybe it was on this video last time, that men are very visual. Men are very visual creatures. Women tend to be more on the realm of emotional wise, as far as stimulation, as far as needing hugs and cuddles and things of that nature. Men tend to be much more visual on things, and so their arousal comes from just visually seeing. And this is what happened with David. David saw a beautiful young lady, and her name was Bathsheba, and he inquired to find out who she was. Of course, we know who she was. She was Bathsheba, and she belonged to somebody else. But that didn't stop David, because David was the king, and David thought he deserved whatever he wanted. And David thought he deserved to have another man's, Uriah's wife. He thought that because, hey, I'm the king, I can do whatever I want. But you don't have to be a king to have that complex. Sometimes we think we're owed something because we've worked hard, or we've put in extra hours, or we provided for our family, and sometimes we feel like we're not rewarded enough, or we're not getting patted on the back like we should, and so we think, you know what, daggone, I'm going to do something for me. The problem is that when we make the wrong move, it doesn't destroy our lives. It destroys the lives of everybody that's around us. It destroys the lives of everything we're attached to. And if anybody knows anything about adultery or have seen people go through it, you know that it doesn't just destroy their life and their reputation. It destroys families. It destroys extended families. And, if moms and dads are around, it hurts them. It hurts the children. It hurts the reputation of the people who are otherwise have had great reputations, and what takes but a few minutes to accomplish, you could have destroyed a lifetime of work on your legacy. And that's what David done. David, the man after God's own heart, the man who wanted to be pleasing to God, got complacent. And he got his eyes in a place that he shouldn't. And then he fell. David hadn't planned on this. Wasn't nothing that was planned. I mean, he didn't sit around and think, "Hey, you know what? I'm a middle-aged man. I think I deserve to have a younger woman." He didn't plan it. And most of the time, people that go through these things will tell you it wasn't planned. It just happened. It just happened because they weren't on guard. It happened because they weren't paying attention. It happened because they were feeling lonely. It happened because they were feeling entitled. They were tired. Whatever it is, most of the time it's not planned. But it's not guarded against either. And so we have to be very aware as married people, especially our married men and married women. We have to be very careful, on guard, that we guard against this type of temptation. And listen, it's a temptation. It's out there. It's an avenue in which the devil can cause us to sin, and it's an avenue of sin that can get from the guy on the street to the preacher in the pulpit. And we all know preachers who have failed in this area as well as we do the average Joe or the deacon of a church or whatever. We all know people in leadership positions that have fallen. We know the scandals of the 80s and early 90s of Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart. Those were all big type of scandals. But there's also the scandals of the small church in a town somewhere where a pastor leaves his wife for another woman, or they get caught. Never did intended to get caught. But understand this: the Bible makes the statement, says, "Be sure your sins will find you out." Don't ever enter into something like that thinking you're going to get away with it. You eventually will get caught. It always is the case. What's done in secret will always be brought to light, and what we think we're hiding will always come forth. It'll always, always, always be brought to light. And so before you go down that path, please guard your heart. Guard your heart. Look at your family and make sure that you are thinking clearly, that you don't throw away everything for the urge of the moment or for a fantasy of 15 minutes, for somebody who you think is better than what you've got. The problem is you don't see all their warts and all, because you think because you're not with them all the time, right? You really only get to know a person's faults and warts and all those things when you spend time with them. I've had people over the years tell my wife how lucky she was, and the thing about it is that while I try my best to be as good a husband as I can be, the truth of the matter is I'm not always diligent to being a good enough husband. There are times that I don't pay attention to what she says. If I'm watching a game, I'm not attentive to listening to her words, and not all the time do I pick up on the innuendos, or we've been really, especially in our child raising years, we've been very attentive to the children, which has made very little time for us as a couple to go do date nights and things of that nature. But we've been determined that we were going to, our lives were the kids while they were here, while they were with us. Short period of time, we already got one out on our own. And, so even though you might think my wife's got it made, there's flaws there with me. And I'm sure that if you got a closer look, you'd say, yep, you're exactly right. And that's the case with everybody. We think people look attractive from a distance because we're not with them all the time. It's when we live with them and we're there with them, we see the warts and all. And so David didn't guard against this happening. Sent out the guys, go do their thing. And so 1 Corinthians 10:12 says, so whoever thinks he stands must be careful not to fall. Let us not kid ourselves, ladies and gentlemen. Just because we've been stable for 10, 20, 30, 40 years doesn't mean that we can at any given time be susceptible to a temptation and end up falling and ruining our whole life and our legacy because we gave in to something that we should have guarded against. And so again, I want to encourage all of us, especially us men that are going to watch this either tonight or tomorrow, whenever. Make sure you get this to a man and let him see what I'm saying. Guard yourself against this. Guard yourself against it being in a position where you show up at 40 or 50 years old and you ruin your future because of a fleeting moment. And so that's what David done. If you remember David's the story of Bathsheba, now we'll probably deal with this, I would imagine, moving forward, but let's think this thing through. So David takes Bathsheba and he has sexual relations with her. He gets her pregnant, finds out that she's pregnant. Well, he sums up that it can't be Uriah's because Uriah was out to war. And so he thought this scheme up that he would get Uriah back and let them have time together and they would have sex. And so then they could say it was his, except Uriah was a man of character. And he said that he wouldn't leave the footsteps of the palace where his Lord was at to go home and lie with his wife. And so that didn't work. And when you see how this progresses, David stepped into sexual sin, and now he's trying to cover it up because he's got Bathsheba pregnant. And so now the plan with Uriah doesn't work out. So now what's he do? Well, the only thing that he knows to do is put Uriah on the front lines and hope that Uriah dies in battle. So now this man who was once called the man after God's own heart, because of a weakness when he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, he wasn't out with the men in battle. He was in the springtime walking the palace. He sees a woman with no clothes on, and he decides that he's going to bring her home, bring her to his palace, because he's the king and he's entitled to it. Now he's led it from not only just sexual sin to now he's responsible for a man's murder. You really think David thought all this out? There was no time of that, I believe, of that whole decision, that when David woke up from a late afternoon nap and started to walk across the roof of the palace, that he think, let's find a woman with no clothes on and let's have an affair with her, get her pregnant, kill her husband. But these type of things snowball, and they snowball quickly. And so you make a mistake, you try to cover it up, and when covering it up don't work, you try this, you try that, all the way down to try to save your hide. And that's what David's done. And the baby that Bathsheba has, it now dies. David's kingdom's tore from him because he wasn't guarded against the ideal of sexual sin. Folks, we don't talk about this enough in the church. And I know enough church people who've had affairs, enough church leaders who've done the same and have lost their leadership positions. But more than that, who cares about the position? They've lost their integrity. They've lost the respect of their family. Their children now look at them different. And maybe all this could have been avoided if the church would speak up a little bit more and say, hey, this is a major area that Satan attacks middle-aged men and women. Well, why middle-aged? Why not young people? Well, young people was attacked by it too, but we're talking specifically David was a man with some age on him. And David was a man who had created a career, who become king, who had a reputation, who was a spiritual leader as well as a regular earthly leader. Young men need to be told this stuff by middle-aged men and say, hey, brother, don't give in to the temptation. Don't give in. It's not worth it. Marry you somebody. Have integrity. Don't sleep with that young lady, young man. Don't sleep with that young lady until she's your wife. I said last week that there is a reason why married people can have sexual relations for years and years and years, and they never get sexually transmitted diseases. There's a reason why married people can have sex and they don't have to hide in the corner in the dark of night. They don't have to rent a motel room 6 miles away from home or 3 counties over or in another state. Why? Because God created sexual relations for a man and his wife. And there is no shame in that. There is no disease produced in that. And there's no reason to go run and hide because it's God's design. When we do it outside of that design, there's guilt, there's shame, we have to hide. We don't want people to know. There's the byproduct of people have abortions because they weren't ready to have children. Single mom don't want to have a child by herself, so she has an abortion. A young man don't want to stand up when he gets a young woman pregnant and pay child support, so he pays to have an abortion. And now we've got the abortion industry in America. And all that stuff could be eliminated if we operated in the area the way God told us to. When did Adam and Eve have shame? If you notice in Genesis chapter 2, Adam and Eve's 1 and 2, they're told by God, be fruitful. That's a King James word that says have a lot of sex. Be fruitful and what? Multiply. The only way you're multiplying is by being fruitful. And so they were doing that. When did the shame come in? When they disobeyed God. And when they disobeyed God, then shame immediately came in. Why? They went and hid themselves. You remember that? Genesis chapter 3, God comes walking in the cool of the day looking for man. He hollers for man, and because man's not visible. Now, God knew where he was at all the time, but he calls out for man, and Adam says, here we are. And God says, why are you hiding? And he says, we're hiding because we're naked. And God said, who told you were naked? Did you do something I told you not to do? So outside, doing sin, committing sin, always brings shame. And because God has laid down the parameters, for this reason a man shall leave his father and his mother, shall cling unto his wife, or cleave unto his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. You see, there would be no such thing as this women lib thing. If we lived out according to the Bible, because we'd be one flesh. And so we would treat our women like we treat ourselves. We would love them and appreciate them and put them on a pedestal. But the whole women's anti-man movement thing comes out of Genesis 3. The Bible says the curse of the woman is because you've done this, you're going to have increased pain at childbirth, Genesis 3:16. You're going to have increased pain at childbirth, and your desire will be to rule over your husband. The word desire there is teshukow, which means to rule over, not sexual desire, but to rule over. And you're going to have a desire to rule over your husband. He said, but God said, I'm not going to allow that to happen. He will dominate you. Now, he would dominate woman until Jesus came and made the remedy. So when Jesus came and he died on the cross at Calvary, we're no longer under the curse. So now, as Bible-believing Christians, when you're born again, God sees not two of you, but he sees one of you. Okay? So that's why there's no shame in it. And that's why you say, well, that sounds old-fashioned. Really? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with a man and a woman coming together and saying, you know what, I'm going to commit my life to loving you. I'm going to commit my life from youth to old age, or however long the Lord gives us. I'm going to commit myself to you and you alone. Now, what the devil says when he comes along and tempts us, he said, well, you're missing out on a whole lot. Whole lot of fish in the ocean out there. And you sure you want to be stuck with this one? Okay, that's the temptation, especially for men. That's the temptation. You know, your old woman's, you know, men call them the old woman. I always hated that term. Don't call her the old woman. You chose her. The old woman, she's at home, she's griping about everything. You know, she's down on me about this, she's down on me about that. Look at that young little thing over there in the office. She laughs at my jokes and she thinks everything's funny. Yeah, but that's because she don't live with you. She lived with you, it might be a different story. And 9 times out of 10 it is. You know, most of the time that people who have affairs and they hook up with one another don't last. Why? Because the attraction was sexual, not relational. Think about that for just a minute. The attraction was sexual, but not relational. So there's not a whole lot, you know, they don't really care if they know a whole lot about each other because they're only worried about this one aspect. The problem is you can't maintain a long-term relationship if all you're thinking about sex. Because there's going to come a day when your bodies are going to break down and you're going to get older, and that's not going to be as important as it is when you're 20 years old. And if you don't ever develop a relationship with somebody, you're going to have problems. Me and my wife have been together now. We've been married this year. This will be our 27th year of marriage. But we've been together 31. I think that's right. 1990 we started dating. So we've been together 30 years. 31, 32 years. And I'm at the place now where I've told Pam, I said, you know what? If you ever decide to leave me, I'd like to have an advance notice so I can pack my stuff and go with you wherever it is you're going. I don't want to start over. I don't want to be cool and have 220s. Tell her all the time, she's in her 40s, I'm trading in for 220s. Nah, I ain't going to do that either. We're going to settle on in here. We're going to serve God together. And we're going to try to guard against this stuff because it even happens to preachers. And I hope that I can be like Charles and Emma Garrison I saw today. Charles is 92. He's in the hospital. And hospice been called in. Him and Miss Emma have been married 72 years. And so she had went home and took a little nap this afternoon. And so I went up to the hospital. And his daughter and him was in there. And we visited a while. And on my way out, she pulled up. And her daughter went and got a wheelchair, and I prayed with her in the parking lot. And I said, Miss Emma, pray you have a good day. And she said, I'm getting ready to go up there to the room where he's at, and anytime I'm around him, it's a good day. That's 72 years. Wow. I hope we're that way. But I know this, that we won't be that way if it's not intentionally worked on. And so we got to work on these things. Men, we got to guard against this stuff. It's important. I've got a daughter who's dating. I've set the example and continue to set the example. And the neat thing about it is, with the boy she's dated now for almost a year, the young man's, he's paying attention. And he's told my daughter that he don't want to do anything to disappoint me. Well, I'm thinking, dude, I don't want you to do anything to disappoint me either. But isn't that how it should be? That we should. And listen, if you're watching this tonight and you've messed it up, you've already made a blowed it maybe once, twice, 3 times a lady, whatever. Here's the thing you need to understand, is that God will forgive you if you'll ask, and He'll clean your slate clean as if it never happened. Now, you're at the place you can't do anything about what the world says. They remember, they know, okay? You can't change that. But what you can do moving forward is make a promise to God and a promise to yourself that for however long He gives you, you're going to set a new example, an example of a believer under the blood of Christ, living for Him, and I'm going to do this God's way. Even if it means I have to do it alone. Because God may ask you, go at it alone. And I'd so admire you widow ladies that have made a commitment to your husband in which you were released at death. There's nothing biblical or earthly that binds you past death. And a lot of you widow ladies have said, you know what, I'm married to that man, and I want to live and go to heaven and be buried on this side of the planet beside that man and be reunited with that man when I get to heaven. And I admire that more than you realize. And so, bravo to you for saying, you know what, I'm still considered married. Just because he died or she died, I'm still married. And I hope when the time comes, if that happens, Pam goes before me, I hope that I have the ability and the strength to stay straight and belong to her until my time to go to heaven. Men don't tend to handle that as nearly as well as women do. But you ladies that do it, I bless you for that. Great example. But if you've messed it up, take it to God. Ask Him to forgive you. Get a clean slate. Now make a promise to God that moving forward, I will do it your way. What's that mean? That means the next time I'm feeling sorry for myself, or I'm down, or I'm feeling like I'm entitled, I'm not going to give in to a sexual advance of somebody. That means I'm saving myself from this point forward for marriage. I'm going to wait. And when God brings me somebody, and I've dated him for 3 weeks, doesn't mean I'm going to jump right in and say, okay, we've been together 3 weeks, that's long enough. We're going to make a commitment that until we get married before God, we're going to do the stay apart thing until the two becomes one flesh. Now, I know the comment here is going to be, well, man, that is old-fashioned. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's old-fashioned. But how many of you people with some age on you had grandmamas out there that was running around at 60 and 70 years old trying to be cool and hip and pick up young guys? Nobody. You remember your grandma and your grandpa together, when they were old. And that's the legacy you want to leave for your children, your grandchildren. Again, like I say, you can't do anything about your past. Repent of it. Ask God to forgive you. He cleanses it, wipes it as far as east is from the west. Forgive yourself and make a commitment. See to it that whoever thinks he stands must be careful not to fall. Now, what's that mean? That means, listen, you can't just say, oh, it ain't ever going to happen to me. No, you got to be careful at this. Because the devil will hit you. He generally hits us when we feel like we're, we deserve this, right? We deserve to be loved. I deserve to be happy. It's a battle. And so we think about David got caught off guard because he wasn't where he was supposed to be. Are you where you're supposed to be tonight? I think about it this way, and I'll close with this. I don't know. We've been a little bit. I think about it this way. I'm going to have trouble. I think about, so I'll use this example. I had to go through another round of steroids last week. Prednisone, 20 milligrams twice a day. So my face is, I see it in my face. I took a picture earlier. My face is really puffy. And then on Friday, I got another steroid injection in my neck. So steroids. And so steroids make you hungry. And so I have found a way to get around the steroid hunger thing. Eating up everything. Because there was a time I was on steroids and Miss Alma Murphy sent me home with angel food cake after church. I brought it home, and on Monday I was at the house, and I was on steroids. And Pam come home from work and said, "I'd like to have a piece of Miss Murphy's angel food cake." And I said, "I would too." She said, "Well, let's cut us a piece." I said, "I wish we could." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I've ate the whole thing." So I found a way around that is to not to have the food in the house. If you ain't got it in the house to eat, you're probably not gonna put on that extra pounds, right? So don't put yourself in positions that you're in places that you don't need to be. If you're a believer, you don't need to be hanging out in a bar. If you're a believer who's trying to do the right things, you don't need to be hanging out with single men in your house by yourself. I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50 years old. You don't need to do that. That's asking for trouble. If you're a believer and you're trying to do it the right way this time or another, set some standards and make sure they're verbalized so the person you're dating or will be dating clearly understands that this is what the expectation is. After all, if you don't have standards for yourself, why expect them to have standards? You get what you demand. And if you demand respect, either they'll give you respect or they'll get on down the road, one or the other. And so set some boundaries. Make some decisions. But you have to be intentional about it. You have to guard yourself. You have to put a hedge around you. You have to create boundaries. You have to know your weaknesses. And if this is an area that you're weak in, then you've got, especially if you're a leader and you're weak in this area, don't ever go visit a woman by yourself. I always tried to take somebody with me if I visited a younger woman. I never did worry about widow women. They love me and I love them, right? But I tried to make precautions. And listen, I'm going to be honest with you. I could have got caught up in things too. Don't think it, you look at me now, think I'm fat and old and gray. There was a time that I wasn't that bad a looking guy. And, there was some things said and made, suggestions. And thank God I had a wife that was attentive. She saw and she heard and she told me, and I said, "Oh, you're crazy. Ain't nobody want me." She said, "I'm telling you, watch it." And so I'm thankful for that. Because I'm at the place in my life I want to finish well. Not for me, but I want my kids to be proud of me. I want my wife to, after 72 years of marriage, say any day's a good day if I get to be with him. Like Miss Emma said today about Charles. Finish well. It's worth it. It's hard. But you got to want it. And at this place in my life, I want... Here, I'm going to close you with this. I want to protect my daddy's name more than I want to destroy it. More than I want the fleeting pleasures of however long. My son asked me not too long ago, who's the head of this family? And I said, well, I'm glad you asked. Your papa's the head of this family. Well, you're the head of here. I said, you asked who's the head of the family. Your papa's the head of the family. There will come a day when Papa goes on to heaven that I will be the head of this family. And then there will be a day that I've gone on to heaven and you will be the head of this family. But until such time that I or you are head of this family, our job is to not bring any shame to your granddaddy's name. But how about our Heavenly Father? It's our job not to bring him any shame either. There's enough people have done that. Let's don't get in that line. Let's do the right things no matter how hard they are. Believe God. Operate in the boundaries in which He's given us in His Word. And we won't have anything to worry about it when we lay our head down on the pillow. Let the world say what they want about us. We're old-fashioned. We're outdated. We're too restrictive. We're joy suckers. We don't want nobody to have fun. You only live once, and we're wanting to deny people. Let them say what they want. But there's something good about laying your head down on that pillow at night, closing your eyes, and knowing that you're in good standing with your Creator. And if He was to call you in the middle of the night, you would stand before Him and hear Him say, well done, thy good and faithful servant. It's tough. It takes some work. But it's absolutely worth it. Trust me. We love you. Have a great week.